My name's Claire Donovan, I'm 29, and if you'd asked anyone who knew me what I loved most in the world, they would have said two things: art and that blue 1969 Mustang Fastback sitting in my garage. My dad and I restored it together when I was 16. Every bolt, every patch of paint carried his fingerprints and my laughter. He passed away 3 years later. That car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a time machine back to when he was still here. When I met Ethan, I was 26, young enough to still believe in shared dreams, old enough to know better. He was charming in that salesman kind of way. Always knew the right words, the right smile. He worked in real estate and said he admired how hands-on I was with cars. I thought he meant it. For 2 years, we built a life that looked perfect from the outside: matching coffee mugs, a shared Spotify playlist, and weekend trips where he'd take pictures of me beside the Mustang. "You and this car are inseparable," he'd joke. I'd smile because he wasn't wrong. But lately, he'd started calling it the money pit. Said it took up space, time, attention, like he was competing with a ghost he could never impress. The night everything started to unravel, the air smelled like rain and fresh oil. I was in the garage, polishing the hood, humming along to Fleetwood Mac. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, phone glowing in his hand. "Claire," he said, "we need to talk about the car." I wiped my hands on a rag. "What about it? It's been sitting there for years. You hardly drive it anymore. Maybe it's time to let it go." I laughed, soft at first, thinking he was teasing. "Let it go?" "Ethan, it's not a sweater I outgrew. It's my dad's car." He sighed, impatient. "I get that, but it's just metal, Claire. You're sentimental. We need the space for something useful. I've been talking to this guy." I froze. "You what?" "Just a conversation. He's a collector. He said he might be interested if you ever decide to sell." I stepped back, heart thudding. "You had no right to do that." "Come on," he said, voice softening in that practiced way. "I'm trying to help us move forward. You cling to things that keep you stuck." I stared at him, at the faint reflection of both of us in the car's hood. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That was the first time I realized maybe he didn't love me for who I was, but for how easy I made things for him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch until dawn, fingers curled around my dad's old keychain. I could still hear his voice. "You take care of her, kiddo. She'll take care of you." The next morning, Ethan acted like nothing happened. He made coffee, kissed my forehead, said he had to meet a client. I tried to let the storm settle, but something in his tone made my stomach twist. Too casual, too rehearsed. That evening, I came home from work to find an empty space in the garage. No car. Just oil stains where her tires used to rest. For a moment, my brain refused to connect the dots. I checked every corner, even the street, like maybe I'd parked it somewhere else and forgotten. But deep down, I knew. I felt it like a physical wound. "Ethan." My voice cracked the stillness. He came out from the kitchen, holding a beer, face calm, almost relieved, as if a chore had been finished. "Don't freak out," he said. "Where is it?" "I sold it." The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air like smoke, thick and poisonous. "You what?" "It's gone. To a guy named Martin. He's a collector. Paid good money, too. Enough for us to pay off that loan and maybe—" I slapped him before I could think. My hand stung, but not nearly as much as his indifference. "You had no right," I whispered. He rubbed his cheek, eyes flashing anger now. "It's just a car, Claire. You act like it's your father himself sitting in there. You need to grow up." I shook my head. "You didn't sell a car. You sold trust. You sold him." He rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic. The check's on the counter. You can thank me later." I looked at that check, a slip of paper that meant nothing to me. $10,000. My father's legacy reduced to a number with a signature. I didn't cry in front of him. I walked out, barefoot, keys in hand, heart pounding like a hammer in a locked chest. I drove my little Toyota until the road blurred. I parked near the overlook where my dad and I used to eat burgers on weekends. Only then did the tears come. Ugly, raw, unstoppable. How could someone who claimed to love me strip away the only thing that kept me tethered to who I was before him? That night, I slept in the car. I couldn't go back home. The next morning, Ethan texted, "We should talk. You're overreacting." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent hours calling every collector I could find in the state. Finally, a man named Martin Hale answered. His voice was kind, curious. Yes, he said. The '69 Fastback. Beautiful piece. Your boyfriend said it was his." My throat tightened. "No, it's mine. He sold it without my consent." A pause. "Well, that complicates things." He agreed to meet me the next day to clarify ownership. He sounded sincere, professional. I didn't tell Ethan where I was going. He didn't deserve to know. But when I arrived at Hale's private garage, a gleaming collection of vintage cars and chrome reflections, Ethan's car was already in the driveway. He was there, waiting. "Claire," he said, smiling like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "I figured you'd come. I wanted to handle this together." I ignored him, walked straight to Martin, who looked to be in his 50s, a man whose eyes lit up when he talked about engines. "Miss Donovan," he greeted me warmly. "You're right, it's clearly registered under your name." I checked. That puts me in an awkward spot. Ethan stepped forward. "We already made the deal." Martin raised an eyebrow. "You made the deal, not her." He turned to me. "You must have loved this car." I nodded. "My dad and I restored it. It's the only thing I have left of him." Something in his expression softened. He walked around the car, examining the details. "It's rare to see this level of preservation. Whoever worked on this knew what they were doing." I could feel Ethan fidget behind me, his composure slipping. "Look, man, I already paid for shipping and everything." "She's being emotional. Let's just..." Martin held up a hand. "Mr. Blake, you lied about ownership. That voids our agreement. But I'll tell you something." He turned to me, smiling. "Miss Donovan, if you ever decide to sell, I'd gladly offer you 3 times what I paid him. This beauty deserves a real owner who understands her worth." Ethan's face went white. 3 times. 30,000, Martin said calmly. "And I'll throw in a restoration grant if you want to keep her instead." I swear, the silence after that felt like justice itself taking a breath. Ethan tried to laugh it off. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am," Martin replied, eyes twinkling. "Integrity still counts for something in this business." I looked at the car, the soft reflection of my father's smile in the polished hood, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore. Power. I stepped closer, meeting Ethan's eyes. "You said it was just metal. Guess this metal is worth more than you ever understood." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Martin handed me a folder. "Paperwork's yours again. I'll help you reverse the transaction legally. No charge." "Thank you," I said softly. Ethan followed me outside, desperate now. "Claire, wait. I was trying to help us. I didn't think you'd..." I turned, my voice steady. "You didn't think. That's the problem. You just take." My father taught me better. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "We're done, Ethan. You sold the wrong thing. You'll never buy it back." For the first time, he looked small, helpless, like someone who'd gambled on greed and lost everything that mattered. As I drove the Mustang home, wind in my hair, the engine's roar felt like a heartbeat syncing with mine again. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming what was mine, what was sacred. And yet, somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Ethan didn't let go easily. I thought getting the car back would be the end of it. That once I shut the garage door and heard the old metal latch click, I could finally breathe again. But peace doesn't come that easily when someone's torn through your trust. For days, I couldn't shake the sound of Ethan's voice from my head. The casual tone when he said, "I sold it." The way he looked at me, like I was the irrational one for caring. I'd thought love meant safety. Turns out it just gave him access to everything that could hurt me. The first week after I ended it, I barely left the house. I'd sit in the driver's seat of the Mustang at night, fingers on the steering wheel, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. Sometimes, I'd imagine my dad sitting beside me, shaking his head the way he used to when something in life didn't make sense. "You can't fix people the way you fix cars, kiddo," I could almost hear him say. I knew he'd be right. Then, on the fourth morning, Ethan showed up. He stood on the porch like nothing had happened, holding coffee from my favorite shop. His hair was neatly styled, his shirt freshly pressed, his confidence unbroken. He knocked 3 times and then smiled through the window when I didn't answer. "Claire," he called out. "Come on. Don't be dramatic. Let's talk like adults." I stayed silent. He waited a few minutes, checked his phone, sighed, and walked back to his car. But I knew it wasn't over. The next day, there were flowers on my doorstep. No note. Then an email. "You know I didn't mean to hurt you. I was thinking about our future. We could have built something real." He always said our future when he meant his comfort. I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I even told my neighbors not to let him in if he came around. But manipulation doesn't stop just because you set boundaries, it just changes shape. 3 days later, I got a call from my workplace, an auto restoration shop I'd worked at for 4 years. "Claire," my boss, Jeff, said hesitantly, "someone sent a complaint email about you, accusing you of stealing parts for personal projects." My heart dropped. "What? That's ridiculous." "I know. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I don't believe it, but we have to document it anyway." I didn't have to guess who sent it. Ethan was good at this, finding ways to make me look unstable or dishonest, so when I finally spoke up, I'd sound like the bitter ex. That night, I sat on the garage floor, my back against the Mustang's tire, crying into my sleeve. For every hour I'd spent rebuilding this car with love, Ethan was tearing something else apart in me with precision. But grief has a strange rhythm. It starts loud and ends quiet. After a while, I stopped crying and started thinking. If he wanted to make me look weak, the best revenge was to stop being someone who could be broken that easily. I called Jeff the next day and told him I wanted to start taking private clients, restorations, custom paint jobs, anything. I had the skills, the workspace, and now, thanks to Martin Hale's offer, the motivation. When I told Martin about Ethan's sabotage, he didn't look surprised. "Men like that hate losing control," he said simply. So they scrambled to make the person who escaped them look unhinged. He offered me a small job, restoring an old Triumph motorcycle for one of his clients. It wasn't much money, but it was freedom disguised as work. The first day I started sanding the frame, I realized I hadn't felt that kind of calm in months. There was something about the rhythm of restoration, the hum of tools, the scent of oil and steel, that felt like therapy. One night, as I worked late, I got a text from an unknown number. "You'll never find someone who loves you like I did." Then another. "You think that collector really cares about you? You'll regret humiliating me." I stared at the words for a long time before deleting them. Not replying felt like the hardest and most powerful thing I'd done in a while. But still, part of me ached, not because I missed him, but because I missed the version of myself that existed before all this. The version that believed love meant partnership, not possession. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt my routine. Morning runs. Late nights in the garage. Weekend drives along the coast road with the Mustang's top down, the wind clawing through my hair like freedom itself. For the first time in years, I was learning how to be alone without being lonely. And then, inevitably, Ethan showed up again. It was a Friday evening. The sun was sinking low, staining the sky a burnt orange, and I was closing the garage when I heard his voice behind me. "Nice to see you're finally using it." I froze. Turned. He stood there, arms crossed, that same infuriating grin plastered on his face. "You know, I drove by this place 3 times before you noticed. You should get better locks." "I told you to stay away." He shrugged. "I came to apologize." "You already did that," I said. "Right before you lied again." "This isn't about that," he said quickly. "It's about closure. You've made your point. You humiliated me in front of that collector, Claire. You think that makes you better than me?" I exhaled slowly.
No.
It makes me free from you.
His jaw tightened.
You're not as innocent as you think. There it was, the venom beneath the charm. He stepped closer, voice lowering. You'll miss me. Nobody else will put up with your mood swings, your obsession with that car, your little daddy issues. That's when the motion sensor lights snapped on. Bright white light flooded the driveway. And standing behind him was Martin Hale. He'd dropped by unannounced, bringing some spare parts for the Triumph project. For a moment, the scene froze, the past and present colliding like steel on steel. Everything okay here? Martin asked, tone calm but firm. Ethan turned, startled. Who the hell are you? I'm the guy who knows what no means, Martin said. Ethan scoffed. Stay out of it, old man. Martin didn't flinch. I don't take orders from liars who sell what isn't theirs. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the crickets seemed to pause. Ethan's confidence cracked. He muttered something under his breath and stalked off toward his car. You'll regret this, Claire, he hissed. I watched his taillights disappear down the street, my heartbeat finally slowing. Martin looked at me, concern softening his expression. You okay? I nodded, though my hands were trembling.
Yeah.
Just tired of cleaning up messes I didn't make. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Then stop cleaning them. Start building something new. It was simple advice, but it stuck. That night, I sat beside the Mustang again, but this time, I didn't cry. I talked. Out loud. Like my dad could hear me. I finally see what you meant, I said. You told me once that love isn't proven by promises, it's proven by respect. I think I forgot that. The garage was silent except for the faint ticking of the engine. But in that quiet, I felt something like forgiveness blooming. Not for Ethan, but for myself. The next few months were a slow kind of peace. Work picked up. I started collaborating with Martin on classic car showcases. He introduced me to collectors who respected my craft. My reputation grew, not as someone's girlfriend, but as Claire Donovan, restorer and designer. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Ethan online, posts about new deals, new dates, fake smiles that looked emptier than I remembered. I didn't hate him anymore. He'd already punished himself by being exactly who he was. But one afternoon, while preparing my car for a vintage auto fair, something strange happened. A man approached me at the event, clipboard in hand. Ms. Donovan? Yes. He handed me a paper. You've been subpoenaed. Civil claim. Fraudulent sale dispute. My blood ran cold. The document had Ethan's name on it. He was suing me, claiming I'd stolen the Mustang from him. For a few seconds, the world tilted. The laughter of the crowd, the sun flashing off the chrome, it all blurred. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and smiled bitterly. He wanted a war. And this time, I wasn't walking away. The moment I read his name on that subpoena, a cold wave rolled through me. Ethan Blake versus Claire Donovan. The man who sold my father's car without permission was now accusing me of stealing it from him. It would have been laughable if it didn't sting so deeply. For years, I'd imagined justice as something clean, like in the movies. Someone wrongs you. They face the truth, and the credits roll over your victory. But justice in real life is slower. Messier. It comes wrapped in paperwork, deadlines, and anxiety that gnaws at your ribs while you're trying to fall asleep. I sat in my kitchen, papers spread across the table, rereading every line like I could will them into disappearing. My hands shook. Not from fear, exactly, but from disbelief that he still wasn't done trying to control me. The next morning, I called Martin Hale. He answered on the first ring. Claire? I just got served, I said. Ethan's suing me. He's claiming ownership of the Mustang. Says I falsified the title. Silence for a beat. Then, calmly, bring everything you have to my office. Titles, receipts, any record of your father's ownership. When I arrived, Martin already had coffee ready and a legal pad on his desk. His garage was more than just chrome and nostalgia. It had an attached office that smelled faintly of leather and ink. He scanned the documents I brought, flipping through them with the practiced precision of someone who'd seen too many petty wars like this before. Your paperwork's solid, he said finally. Your father bought the car in 1999, registered it in his name, transferred it to you in 2013. All legitimate. Ethan doesn't have a leg to stand on. Then, why does it still feel like he's winning? I muttered. Because he's forcing you to relive what he took from you, Martin said quietly. That's how people like him stay in your life, by turning your pain into a tether. The words hit harder than I expected. I left his office that day with two things: confidence in my evidence and a slow-burning anger that no longer made me cry. It made me focus. Over the next few weeks, I worked by day and gathered documents by night. I found old photos of my dad and me standing beside the car during restoration, invoices from parts dealers, even a framed certificate from a local car show we'd entered together. Each artifact felt like a weapon of truth. Meanwhile, Ethan was busy spreading his version of the story online. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot of his post. Some people will do anything for money. Can't believe my ex forged my name on a car I bought for us. The comments were full of sympathy. People believed him. Of course they did. He had that kind of charm that sounded like sincerity to anyone who hadn't lived with it. At first, I wanted to reply, to post proof, to defend myself publicly. But then I realized that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted me emotional, reactive, messy. So instead, I went silent. I kept my head down, focused on work, and quietly built my case. I even met with a lawyer, a calm, silver-haired woman named Samantha Reyes, recommended by Martin. She listened to everything without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair. "This isn't about a car," she said. "It's about control. He's using the system to make you dance. So we'll play by the rules, but smarter." She filed a counterclaim for emotional distress and defamation, attaching the online posts and the workplace complaint Ethan had sent anonymously. "He left a trail of spite," she said. "Let's make sure it leads right back to him." That night, I went home exhausted but oddly calm. I sat in the garage again, running my hand along the cool metal of the Mustang. "We're going to be okay, Dad," I whispered. "We'll finish this." The first court hearing was surreal. Ethan arrived in a tailored navy suit, tan perfect, hair slicked back. He greeted me like we were meeting for coffee, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "Nice to see you again, Claire," he said softly, as if we shared some private joke. I ignored him. Inside the courtroom, he performed like he always did, confident, articulate, dripping with feigned sincerity. He spoke about how he'd supported me for years, how he'd helped maintain the car, how I'd manipulated him emotionally. I sat there gripping the edge of my chair, forcing myself not to interrupt. My lawyer whispered, "Don't worry. Let him hang himself with his own words." Then Samantha stood. Her voice was measured, calm, but sharp enough to command silence. "Your Honor," she began, "we have documentation proving ownership that predates Mr. Blake's relationship with my client by nearly a decade. Furthermore, we have evidence of unauthorized sale attempts, falsified claims, and deliberate harassment following the termination of their relationship." She handed the judge a file thick enough to break a wrist. Ethan's confident posture wilted slightly. But the moment that really undid him came next. Samantha turned toward Martin, who had agreed to testify. He approached the stand, steady and clear-eyed. "Mr. Hale," Samantha said, "could you describe the circumstances of your attempted purchase?" Martin nodded.
Yes.
"Mr. Blake contacted me claiming he owned a 1969 Mustang Fastback. During inspection, I confirmed the title listed Miss Donovan as the sole owner. When I raised this issue, Mr. Blake became defensive. Miss Donovan arrived shortly after, and I returned the car to its rightful owner. Did Mr. Blake mention the car's history or its sentimental value?" "He said she was too emotional about it," Martin said, voice tightening. "But after seeing how she treated that car, I'd say emotion was the only thing keeping it alive." Laughter rippled faintly through the courtroom. Ethan's lawyer objected to the tone, but the damage was done. The judge's expression had shifted. Interest had turned to irritation. After the session, Ethan cornered me in the hallway. "You think you're winning?" he hissed, voice low. "You embarrassed me in there. You'll regret this." I looked him straight in the eye. You already regret it. You just don't know it yet. He flinched. For the first time, his confidence cracked enough for me to glimpse the small, frightened man underneath. Weeks passed before the next hearing. During that time, Samantha's legal team uncovered a few things. Credit card receipts in Ethan's name showing he'd hired someone to adjust car documentation, fake appraisals submitted to insurance companies, even a text thread where he bragged about flipping my Mustang for cash. When the judge saw those, everything changed. The lawsuit was dismissed. My ownership was reaffirmed, and Ethan was fined for filing false claims. But it didn't feel like triumph, not yet. Because victory isn't just about being right, it's about reclaiming your narrative. That came later, at the Monterey Vintage Auto Fair, 6 months after the case closed. Martin had encouraged me to display the Mustang there, and though part of me was nervous, I agreed. We spent weeks fine-tuning every inch of her, fresh polish, rethreaded interior, original trim restored by hand. It was the kind of meticulous work that my father would have been proud of. When I rolled into the fairgrounds that morning, sunlight glinting off the hood, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't depend on anyone else. People gathered around the car, all day. Collectors, enthusiasts, photographers. A few even asked if I was open to offers. Late in the afternoon, I was sipping coffee near the exhibit when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Nice setup, Claire."
Ethan.
He looked different, thinner, eyes tired, suit cheaper than before. The kind of man who'd run out of people to impress. "I heard you won the case," he said flatly. "Guess congratulations are in order." I turned to face him, calm. "Guess so." He gestured toward the car. "You really think this makes you better than me?" I smiled faintly.
No.
"It just makes me again."
He scoffed.
"You'll always be that sentimental little girl playing mechanic." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I fix things instead of breaking them." And then, as if the universe decided to choreograph the moment, Martin walked up with another man, a gray-haired collector wearing aviator sunglasses and a tailored jacket. "Claire," Martin said warmly, "this is Mr. Lawson. He's been admiring your work all day." Mr. Lawson shook my hand. "This car is extraordinary. I'd like to make you an offer, triple what it's valued at." Ethan's head snapped toward him. "Triple?" Mr. Lawson smiled. "Cars like this, restored with soul, not just polish, they're rare." The same words Martin had once said. I met Ethan's gaze as Mr. Lawson spoke, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the exact memory flicker across his face. The day he'd try to sell it, the moment it slipped from his hands forever. "I appreciate the offer," I told the collector, smiling. "But this car isn't for sale."
Not now.
Not ever. Ethan stood there, speechless, his reflection warped in the chrome fender he'd once called just metal. As he walked away, shoulders slumped, I realized my revenge had already happened. Not in a courtroom, not in money, but in that quiet second when he saw how little his power meant anymore. For the first time since my father's passing, I felt whole. That night, as the fair lights dimmed and the crowd drifted home, I sat behind the wheel again, the Mustang humming softly beneath me. The dashboard light cast a golden glow on my hands. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "We did it." And for once, I didn't need anyone else to see it to know it was true. The weeks after the Monterey Fair felt like living in sunlight after years underground. For the first time, my days didn't revolve around surviving someone else's moods or defending my sanity. I woke up early, brewed coffee, just the way my dad used to, and let the mornings be quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, just peaceful. I thought that was it, that the chapter with Ethan was finally over. But closure isn't a single event, it's a process. And sometimes, life has a way of testing whether you've truly healed or just learned how to act like you have. It started with a phone call from my lawyer, Samantha. "Claire," she said, "I wanted you to hear this from me before you see it online." My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "Ethan filed for bankruptcy last month. He's under investigation for insurance fraud. Apparently, he's been falsifying property values in his real estate deals. The investigators reached out because your case came up during background checks." For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or exhausted. Samantha continued. You're not involved, don't worry. But if they subpoena old communications or records, they might ask for your cooperation. I can handle it if you'd rather stay uninvolved. I thanked her and hung up, staring at my reflection in the window. Outside, the evening light spilled gold across the hood of the Mustang. Ethan was finally unraveling, but I didn't feel joy. Not the way I'd once imagined. I just felt tired. Tired of his shadow stretching into every new phase of my life. Still, a small part of me whispered that maybe this was how karma worked, quietly, efficiently, without any help from me. A few days later, I drove the Mustang to a local charity event Martin had invited me to, a fundraiser for vocational scholarships in automotive trades. He'd convinced me to display the car again, saying, people need to see what skill and perseverance can create. The event was held in an open-air pavilion, overlooking the bay. Music played softly, champagne glasses clinked, and the smell of salt water mixed with motor oil and fresh paint from the restored vehicles gleaming under string lights. As I stood near the car, chatting with attendees, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd. Ethan. For a split second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, the confident walk, the too white smile, it was him. He looked thinner than before, the kind of thin that comes from sleepless nights and restless guilt. His shirt was crisp but wrinkled at the sleeves. And yet, he still had that air of entitlement, as if the world owed him another chance. Claire, he said softly approaching. Martin, standing beside me, stiffened immediately. I'll handle this, I murmured. Ethan stopped a few feet away, hands raised like a man surrendering to a ghost. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to see you. You've seen me, I said evenly. Now go. Please, he insisted. Just 5 minutes. I need to explain. Martin glanced at me, silently asking if I wanted him to stay. I nodded for him to give me space, though every instinct screamed to keep my guard up. When Martin walked off, Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I messed up, he said finally. I lost everything. The company, the house, my reputation shot. I didn't even fight the fraud charges. You were right about me. I crossed my arms. That's not an apology. That's a confession. He winced. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I can't stop thinking about how I treated you. You didn't deserve any of it. I thought if I could make you small, I'd feel big again. The words hit me harder than I wanted them to, because they were true, and hearing them said aloud, in that raw, broken voice, was like pressing on an old bruise that never fully healed. Ethan, I said quietly, you didn't just sell a car. You tried to sell the only piece of my father I had left. You lied, humiliated me, and tried to destroy my reputation. You don't get to walk up now and pretend that admitting it fixes anything. I know, he whispered. I just needed you to know I see it now. I studied him for a long moment. For once, there was no charm, no performance. Just a man facing the wreckage of his own making. You know what the worst part was? I said. I used to wish you'd feel this pain. I thought it would make me feel better. But it doesn't. It just makes me sad that I ever loved someone capable of it. He looked away, swallowing hard. You always were stronger than me. No, I said softly. I just learned what strength actually means. He nodded, eyes glistening. Goodbye, Claire. And then he walked away. No arguments. No theatrics. Just gone. I stood there for a while, watching the tide roll against the docks, trying to steady the ache in my chest. Not pain anymore, just the release that comes when a long battle finally ends. When I turned back, Martin was beside the Mustang, wiping a faint smudge off the fender like he always did when he was pretending not to eavesdrop. You handled that better than most would've, he said quietly. I didn't win, I replied. I just stopped playing. He smiled. That's what winning looks like. After that night, things shifted for good. I threw myself into work, expanding my small restoration business into something real. I started teaching weekend workshops for young women in auto repair, something I wished had existed when I was younger. The first day of class, I stood in front of 12 nervous faces, holding up a wrench like a conductor about to start a symphony. "Ladies," I said, "cars and people aren't that different. You can't fix either one until you understand what broke them first." They laughed, and the sound filled the space like sunlight breaking through dust. By summer, I'd restored 3 cars and taken on a 4th, a cherry red 1970 Dodge Challenger with a seized engine. It was brutal work, but it gave me purpose. Every bolt turned was a reminder that I could rebuild anything, even myself. Then one afternoon, as I was cleaning up, I found a letter slipped under the garage door. No name on the envelope, just my own handwriting, shaky, familiar. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note that read, "This belongs to you."
E.
I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to feel grateful or insulted. The amount was the same Ethan had gotten when he first sold the Mustang behind my back. I never cashed it. Instead, I framed it and hung it on the garage wall, a silent reminder that closure doesn't always come from apologies or revenge. Sometimes it comes in the form of letting the past repay its own debt. Months passed, and the garage became more than just a workspace. It became a kind of sanctuary. Clients came and went, stories traded hands along with spark plugs and chrome trims. Martin stopped by often, bringing parts and wisdom, sometimes just sitting quietly while I worked. One evening, he asked, "You ever think about selling the Mustang? Not for the money, just to let it start a new story?" I looked at the car, gleaming softly under the warm light. "No," I said. "It's not ready to leave. And neither am I." He nodded. "Then keep driving it. Every mile is a reminder that you chose your road." That night, I took the Mustang out along Highway 1. The ocean stretched beside me like a dark mirror, waves crashing against the cliffs. I rolled the windows down and let the wind steal whatever pieces of the past were still clinging to me. At one point, I pulled over at the old Overlook, the same one where I'd once cried in the front seat, broken and lost. Now I stepped out, leaned against the hood, and smiled. The sky was painted with streaks of violet and gold, and for a moment, I swore I could hear my dad's laughter in the wind. "I kept her, Dad," I whispered. And I kept myself too. I stayed there until the first stars came out, engine ticking quietly beneath me, heart steady. No more lawsuits. No more ghosts. No more trying to prove anything to anyone.
Just me.
The road. And the hum of something that finally, after all this time, sounded like peace. It's strange how life starts to bloom again once you stop waiting for apologies. Months had slipped quietly by since Ethan's last attempt at redemption, and the sharp edges of everything he'd broken had finally dulled. My garage smelled like oil and orange cleaner, sunlight pooling through the skylight onto half-finished projects, signs of life, not loss. I'd expanded my workshop, renamed it Donovan Restoration Company, and for the first time, the sign out front bore my name alone. Some mornings, I'd catch myself staring at it from the sidewalk, coffee in hand, just to remind myself how far I'd come. One Friday afternoon, a young woman walked into the shop. She couldn't have been more than 23, her hair in a messy ponytail, grease smudged across her cheek. "Are you Miss Donovan?" she asked, a little breathless. "That's me," I said. "What can I do for you?" She glanced around the garage like it was sacred ground. "I've been watching your videos online, the ones you did for the scholarship program. The way you talk about restoration, it's different. You make it sound like healing." I smiled. "That's because it is." She bit her lip. "My name's Haley. I dropped out of community college last year. My mom said fixing cars isn't a career, but it's all I've ever wanted to do. I just need someone to teach me." There was something in her eyes, familiar, defiant, hopeful. The same spark I used to see in my own reflection before life tried to dim it. I nodded. "All right, Haley. You start Monday." Her face lit up like sunrise. Over the next few weeks, she became a fixture in the garage. She asked questions constantly, scribbled notes in a grease-stained notebook, and cursed under her breath every time a bolt refused to loosen. It reminded me of myself at her age, stubborn, driven, impatient to prove I belonged in a world that didn't expect much from me. Sometimes she'd ask about the Mustang. "So, this is the car?" She'd say reverently, running her fingers over the chrome. "This is her," I'd reply. "Every scar, every scratch. It's a story. My dad and I rebuilt her when I was your age." "What happened to him?" "He passed away," I said softly. "But he left me this. It's more than a car. It's a promise that I could rebuild anything." She nodded, her voice quiet. "That's how I feel about my grandpa's old truck. My mom wants to junk it, but I can't." "Then don't," I said simply. "Some things aren't meant to be let go. They're meant to be restored." That day, Haley stayed late, helping me replace the carburetor on an old Thunderbird. When we finished, she grinned. "You're right," she said. "Fixing things does feel like healing." "Just wait until you drive it," I told her. "That's when it really hits." Over the following months, the garage became something more than a business. It became a kind of community. Women from neighboring towns started showing up for workshops. Mechanics dropped by to share stories. Even Martin became a regular presence, half mentor, half friend. One evening, he brought an envelope with him. "What's this?" I asked. "Something that belongs to you," he said. "The Auto Fair Committee is awarding you the Heritage Restorer of the Year honor. They want you to give a short speech next weekend." I laughed. "A speech? Martin, I can barely talk about myself in interviews." "You'll do fine," he said with a wink. "Just tell them the truth. That's what people remember." That weekend came faster than I expected. The event was held in the same coastal venue where I'd once faced Ethan months before, but this time, there were no ghosts waiting in the crowd. Just faces full of admiration and curiosity. When they called my name, I stepped up to the small wooden podium, heart pounding. "Hi," I began, voice trembling slightly. "My name's Claire Donovan. I restore cars, but mostly, I restore stories." The crowd quieted. I used to think I was saving these machines from rust and time. But really, they were saving me from grief, from anger, from losing myself. Every dent and scrape has something to teach us about survival, about what endures. I paused, scanning the audience until my eyes found Haley's. She stood near the back, hands clasped, smiling through tears. "So, if you've ever been broken," I continued, "if someone's ever taken something from you that you thought you'd never get back, remember this. You can rebuild. You can start again. Because worth isn't something someone else can sell. It's something you carry with you." The applause that followed felt like thunder in my chest. Afterward, Haley hugged me tightly. "You sounded just like my grandpa when he used to talk about fixing things. He'd be so proud of you." "Then let's make sure you keep making him proud," I said. That night, I sat in the Mustang again, looking at the reflection of the event lights dancing on the hood. My father's face seemed to shimmer in my memory, smiling, steady. "I think I finally did it, Dad," I whispered. "I turned the hurt into something worth keeping." But peace, I was learning, doesn't mean life stops testing you. It just means you meet the tests differently. A few weeks later, as summer gave way to early autumn, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name printed neatly in black ink. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping. It was about Ethan. Local businessman sentenced to 2 years for fraudulent dealings. There was a small photo. Ethan in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, eyes dull, mouth tight. Beneath it, a short paragraph detailing his charges, his guilty plea, and the restitution he was ordered to pay. At the bottom of the envelope, there was a single handwritten note. "You were always right about him. M." I wasn't sure who M was, maybe Martin, maybe someone else from that world, but it didn't matter. I set the clipping aside and went back to work. No anger, no gloating, just quiet understanding that life had taken care of what I no longer needed to carry. Haley found the clipping a few days later, tucked under some papers. "Is this your ex?" she asked cautiously. "It was," I said, "but not anymore. He's just part of the story." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then I guess the story turned out okay." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "It did." Later that evening, We rolled the Mustang out into the driveway. The sunset burned gold against its polished surface. Haley climbed into the passenger seat, her excitement contagious. "Ready?" I asked. "For what?" "For your first drive." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" I tossed her the keys. "Just don't scratch her." She laughed nervously but climbed in. As the engine roared to life, I saw something in her expression that reminded me of myself the day my dad handed me those same keys. Fear, joy, reverence, freedom. We drove along the coast road, the wind loud, the sky pink and endless. Haley gripped the steering wheel with both hands, smiling like she'd found her place in the world. When we stopped at the old overlook, I looked out at the horizon and said quietly, "Every time I drive this car, I feel like I'm carrying 2 generations with me, my dad's hands on the wheel and yours next to mine. That's what legacy really means." Haley turned to me, eyes shining. "You think I'll ever be as good as you?" I laughed softly. "No," I said. "You'll be better." We sat there until the sun dipped completely, the engine ticking softly, the air thick with salt and promise. For the first time in years, I felt the kind of peace that doesn't ask for attention. It just exists. And as the stars began to pierce the twilight, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes the best revenge isn't showing them what they lost. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. I started the car again, shifted into gear, and drove forward, leaving the past in the rearview mirror, exactly where it belonged. A year passed, and time, for once, moved gently. No sharp turns, no collisions, just steady roads and open skies. Donovan Restoration Company had grown into something far bigger than I'd planned. What started as one woman and her father's Mustang had become a workshop humming with laughter, tools, and the music of second chances. Haley was now my right hand, equal parts apprentice and little sister. I trusted her with everything, even the Mustang, which was no small thing. She'd earned it. On quiet afternoons, I'd watch her move through the garage with confidence, hands steady, voice clear, showing other young women how to sand panels or mix paint. I saw in her the version of me I wished had existed years ago, unapologetic, fearless, grounded. Sometimes I wondered if that was my real revenge against life, not payback or justice, but creating something beautiful from what once broke me. One Monday morning, while I was sorting through invoices in the office, Haley rushed in, excitement bursting from her like static. "Claire, you need to come out here right now." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's amazing. There's a guy here says he knew your dad." My heart skipped. "My dad?" She nodded.
"Yeah."
Said his name's Walter Crane. He saw the Mustang online and drove all the way from Nevada. I followed her outside. The man waiting by the car looked to be in his late 60s, tall, weathered face, sunspots on his hands. He wore a faded mechanic's jacket with a patch that read Crane's Auto and Salvage. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "You must be Claire." "That's me," I said carefully. "You knew my father?" He smiled faintly. "Knew him? We built cars side by side for almost 20 years. He was one of the best. Always talked about you, his little engineer," he used to say. The sound of that nickname hit me like a gust of warm wind from the past. "He called me that," I whispered. Walter nodded. "He said when you were 16, you rebuilt the carburetor on this Mustang all by yourself. He bragged about it for weeks." I laughed softly, blinking away the sting in my eyes.
"He did."
"And he yelled at me for getting grease on the kitchen floor." Walter chuckled. "That sounds like him." Then his face grew more serious. "There's another reason I came. Before he passed, your dad left something with me. Said to give it to you when you were ready to understand." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, my father's handwriting on the front. "For Claire, when she's ready." My breath caught. "Why now?" Walter shrugged gently. "Saw what you've built here. Figured you're ready." He left soon after, leaving me with the letter. I took it inside, sat at the old workbench, and stared at it for a long time. The paper felt fragile, like touching a memory that could crumble if I breathed too hard. When I finally opened it, my father's handwriting spilled across the page in his familiar blocky script. "Hey, kiddo. If you're reading this, it means you've kept her running. I knew you would. You always had more fight in you than I did. There's something you should know about the Mustang. She wasn't just a project. Back when I was restoring her, I entered a small collectors group with some friends. We did it for fun, but one of the sponsors offered us a contract for a limited restoration series, 10 cars, each with a special modification. Only one got finished, this one. It's registered under a private design patent in both our names. If you ever need proof of what you're worth, remember this. Your name is written into her history. Not because I gave it to you, but because you earned it. Take care of her and of yourself. Love always, Dad." I read it 3 times, the words blurring each time. My name, written into the car's history, into his legacy. It wasn't about money or fame. It was validation from the only man whose approval had ever truly mattered. When I told Martin about it later that evening, he smiled knowingly. "Your dad was smart. He wanted to make sure no one could ever take what was yours again." "Looks like he succeeded," I said softly. But that letter didn't just bring peace. It brought something else, opportunity. The next week, Haley and I filed the design documents with the Historical Restoration Board. They confirmed the registration still existed. Suddenly, my father's old project had become something official, the Donovan prototype, a piece of automotive history. Within months, journalists started calling. A vintage car magazine featured a full spread, The Forgotten Mustang, how a daughter revived her father's dream. The article went viral in our little corner of the world. Collectors started visiting. Clients doubled. The waiting list for restoration jobs stretched 6 months out. And through it all, I felt my father's presence like an unseen hand on my shoulder, steady and proud. Haley teased me one afternoon, waving a copy of the magazine. "You're famous now, boss." I laughed.
Please.
I'm just the woman who learned not to give up. But late at night, when the shop was quiet, I'd sometimes hold that letter again, tracing the ink with my thumb, whispering thank yous to the empty air. One autumn evening, as the sky blushed pink over the bay, a delivery truck pulled into the lot. "Expecting parts?"
Haley asked.
"No," I said. "Not today." The driver handed me a clipboard and a small crate. "Delivery for Donovan Restoration. Paid in full." There was no sender's name, just a note taped to the box. "Every road deserves another start." Inside the crate was a vintage steering wheel, perfectly polished, with a small brass engraving. To CD, keep driving. M.H. Martin. He'd been planning to retire for months, talking about moving closer to his daughter in Oregon.
I didn't realize this was his goodbye.
I called him that night. "You sentimental old man," I said. He chuckled. "Just wanted to leave you something before I go. You've got this, Claire. You don't need my advice anymore." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'll miss it anyway." "Then consider that will a reminder. Every turn you take from now on is yours." After we hung up, I sat in the Mustang, holding the steering wheel against the fading sunset, and thought about all the hands that had shaped my journey, my father's, Martin's, even Ethan's in his own destructive way. Each of them had left a mark, a lesson, a turning point. The next morning, I installed the wheel. The fit was perfect, solid, smooth, balanced. When I turned it, I could almost hear my dad laughing, Martin giving quiet approval, Haley clapping in the background. The shop was alive again, and so was I. That weekend, Haley brought her mother by to see the garage. The older woman looked skeptical at first, until she saw her daughter standing proudly beside the Mustang, grease on her hands, confidence in her eyes. "She's good," her mother admitted. "She's better than good," I said. "She's unstoppable." Haley blushed, and for a moment, I saw my father watching me the same way, quietly proud. Later, when they left, I walked out to the overlook one more time. The wind was cool, the sea restless, the horizon endless. I thought about the long road behind me, the betrayal, the loss, the lawsuit, the rebuilding, and realized that none of it had destroyed me. It had simply carved me into someone who could withstand anything. Sometimes I still dream of my father. In those dreams, we're back in the garage, hands black with oil, Fleetwood Mac playing softly in the background. He hands me a wrench and says, "Your turn, kiddo." And every morning after, when I start the Mustang and hear the familiar rumble, I smile. Because I know what he meant. It is my turn. My turn to build. My turn to lead. My turn to live. And for the first time in years, the road ahead doesn't scare me. It calls to me. So I answer it. I put the car in gear, feel the engine hum beneath me, and drive toward the horizon, where grief becomes gratitude, where the past fades into purpose, and where every mile is another promise kept. 2 years later, I could finally say it without hesitation. I was happy. Not the dizzy kind that depends on someone else's validation, not the temporary rush that fades when the moment passes. No, this was the quiet, steady kind that grows roots. The kind you earn. The garage thrummed with life. Every workbench was taken, every corner filled with sound, the hum of sanders, the hiss of spray guns, the laughter of women unafraid to take up space. The air smelled like metal, oil, and ambition. Donovan Restoration Company had become something more than a workshop. It was a movement. The local paper called us the new generation of mechanics, but that wasn't it at all. We weren't new. We'd always been here. We'd just finally been seen. Haley now ran the training program full-time. She was 25, confident, capable, already mentoring the next wave of girls who'd walk in with doubt and leave with dirt under their nails and pride in their eyes. And me? I'd learned to step back. Not to disappear, but to make space for what came next. That morning, I sat at my desk, reviewing applications for our next scholarship batch, when the shop phone rang. "Donovan Restoration," I answered. A warm male voice replied, "Miss Donovan? My name's Peter Crane. I think you might know my father, Walter." I smiled. "Of course. How's he doing?" "He passed away last month," Peter said gently. "I'm sorry to tell you like this. He always spoke fondly of you." My heart sank. Walter had been the last tangible link to my father's workshop days. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "He left something for you," Peter continued. "Said it belonged with the Mustang." A week later, a small wooden box arrived in the mail. Inside was a metal badge, polished but worn, engraved with my father's initials and the words Crane and Donovan Prototype No. 1. There was also a note in Walter's handwriting. "Your father and I used to talk about building a car that wasn't just restored, but reborn. Looks like you finished the dream for both of us. Take this badge, kid. You earned it." I held it in my palm for a long time, the metal warm for my skin. Then I walked to the garage, knelt by the Mustang, and attached the badge to the inside of the driver's door, just above the handle. When I closed the door, the click sounded final, like the punctuation at the end of a long, beautiful sentence. That evening, Haley found me sitting beside the car, staring at the badge. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "Just thinking how strange it is that everything I ever lost somehow brought me here." She tilted her head. "You mean your dad?" "Dad, Ethan, the lawsuits, all of it. If even one thing hadn't broken, I might have stayed small. I might have stayed afraid." Haley nodded. "Guess sometimes being broken's just how the light gets in." "Exactly." She grinned. "You sound like a Hallmark card." "Hey," I said, laughing. "Hallmark wishes they had this story." That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind in the garage. The air was still except for the gentle hum of the lights. I walked around the Mustang, fingers tracing the curves we'd spent years perfecting. Every inch held a memory. The day I got her back from Ethan, the court hearings, the charity drive, the first time Haley took the wheel. The car wasn't just metal anymore. She was a living archive of every version of me I'd ever been. As I sat behind the wheel, the overhead light flickered softly, casting the dashboard in gold. I ran my thumb over the new steering wheel Martin had sent, then over the badge Walter left, and finally over the faint etching of my father's initials near the glove box. 3 men. 3 eras. All part of one story that somehow ended right here, with me breathing, healed, and free. I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, deep and smooth. For a moment, I closed my eyes. In the rhythm of the motor, I could hear them all: my father's steady voice, Martin's quiet wisdom, Walter's laughter. It wasn't grief anymore. It was gratitude. I shifted into gear and pulled out of the driveway, the night swallowing me whole. The city lights blurred by, and somewhere along the coastal road, I stopped counting how far I'd gone. When I reached the overlook, the same one where I'd once sobbed alone years ago, I parked and stepped out. The wind was sharp, carrying the tang of salt and the faint hum of traffic below. The ocean stretched out before me, black and infinite. I sat on the hood, the metal warm beneath me, and took out my phone. A text from Haley blinked on the screen. Made it home safe. Don't stay too late at the shop, okay? You work too much. I smiled and typed back. Just one last drive. Promise. Then I turned off the phone and looked up at the stars. In the silence, I remembered something my father once told me when we were fixing a dented fender. The trick isn't to erase the damage, kiddo. It's to make it part of the story. That's what gives it character. I hadn't understood it then, but standing there now, wind tugging at my hair, salt biting my lips, I did. The dents, the scars, the heartbreak, they weren't things to be hidden. They were proof of survival. I looked at the car one more time and whispered, "You've carried me long enough, old girl. Time to see what's next." The next morning, I arrived at the shop before sunrise. Haley was already there, yawning over a mug of coffee. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. What's the plan today?" I hesitated. "I've been thinking, it's time for the Mustang to rest." Her eyes widened. "You're not selling it?" I shook my head. "Never. I'm donating her to the Automotive Heritage Museum. They're starting an exhibit on women in restoration. She deserves to be seen, to tell her story." Haley looked stunned for a moment, then smiled slowly. "That's perfect. It's full circle," I said softly. "She started as a father's project, became my salvation, and now she'll inspire others. That's legacy." A week later, we delivered her to the museum. They set her on a raised platform under soft lighting, polished to a mirror finish. A small plaque at the base read, 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback, the Donovan prototype restored by Claire Donovan in honor of her late father, Thomas Donovan. A story of love, loss, and rebuilding. As the curator thanked me, I stood there quietly, trying not to cry. Haley slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" "Yeah," I whispered. "It feels like saying goodbye, but a good one." That night, back at the empty garage, I sat in the silence, feeling both full and weightless. I realized something then, something simple but profound. Revenge had given me a moment. Forgiveness had given me peace. But letting go? That gave me freedom. The next morning, sunlight poured through the skylight, and the smell of coffee drifted from the office. Haley was already there, blueprints spread on the table. "What's that?" I asked. "Our next project," she said, grinning. "A72 Nova. Needs a miracle. Think we're up for it?" I laughed. "We're always up for it." As I joined her, I glanced once more at the empty space where the Mustang used to sit. It wasn't loss anymore, it was legacy. And as we got to work, the sound of the new project filled the garage, a familiar hum, steady and strong. I picked up a wrench, smiled to myself, and whispered under my breath, "All right, Dad. My turn again." The light caught the dust in the air, turning it gold. Outside, the morning stretched endlessly ahead. Open road, open heart, open future. Because restoration never really ends. It just keeps beginning.